Mom liquidated her savings to fight me in court, all to defend my stepfather's right to be near my twin daughters. Marcus, my stepfather, was convicted of domestic violence and served 4 years in prison for assaulting his previous partner's child. But when he was released on parole, my entire family insisted that I allow him around my twin 9-year-old daughters, Emma and Sophie. When I refused, they launched an extensive harassment campaign, including having him appear at Emma's school play, uninvited, forcing me to seek a protection order. Then, my mother drained her life savings on legal fees to challenge me. While the extended family pressured us and filed malicious reports with child services, we were ultimately forced to pay him $25,000 to cease his harassment. When my stepfather Marcus was released from prison, my mother called me 22 times in one day. I knew exactly what she wanted before answering. She had been conditioning me for weeks with talk about rehabilitation and family bonds, but there was absolutely no way I was allowing a convicted abuser near my twin daughters. Marcus had served a 4-year sentence for what he had done to his ex-girlfriend's 12-year-old son. The victim was just 3 years older than my twins, but I felt like the family outcast for saying no. Mom showed up at my house the morning after his release. She had prepared an entire presentation about his transformation and newfound spirituality. She displayed a binder filled with certificates from prison rehabilitation programs. He completed anger management parenting classes and addiction counseling, she declared. This supposedly erased his violent past. "Where is your compassion?" she demanded. I kept my response firm and clear. He was not welcome in my home. Not for dinner, not for holidays, and not for 5 minutes. My daughter's safety was my priority. Mom's expression shifted from pleading to pure rage. She snapped, "Those girls need a father figure. You're denying them family stability." The guilt campaign started immediately. My sister Rachel called sobbing about Marcus having nowhere to turn. Every evening, Dad sent me articles about forgiveness and second chances. Even my cousin Diana, who lived across the country, felt compelled to lecture me about everyone deserving redemption, but they reserved their worst manipulation for Sunday brunch. I had stopped by Mom's to collect my grandmother's jewelry, which she had been cleaning. The entire family was there, Marcus too. He sat at the dining table as if nothing had happened, as if he hadn't terrorized a child. My daughter Emma called out, "Papa Marcus!" Before I could react, she ran toward him, Sophie close behind. I moved faster than I ever had in my life. I scooped up both girls and headed for the exit. Marcus had the nerve to look wounded. "I just wanted to see them," he said quietly. "I'm their grandfather figure." That's when I exploded. I told him that being part of our family didn't grant him access to my children. I reminded everyone present what he had been convicted of. Mom literally put her hands over her ears. Dad mumbled something about dwelling on the past. Rachel accused me of traumatizing the girls with my paranoia. The character assassination began the next day. Mom told her book club that I was keeping her granddaughters from her. She conveniently omitted the reason why. Rachel posted on social media about how some people refuse to embrace healing. Multiple relatives responded with supportive comments and inspirational quotes. My phone was flooded with messages from people who didn't know the full story. Then Marcus started appearing at places we frequented like the library and the community pool. Always maintaining distance and claiming coincidence, he would wave to the girls from across the children's area. I began documenting everything: dates, times, locations, and witnesses. My husband installed security cameras after we spotted him driving past our house twice in one evening. The final straw came during Sophie's ballet recital. We had reserved seats in the school auditorium and invited both grandmothers. Halfway through the performance, Marcus walked in with flowers. Mom followed behind him beaming as if she had orchestrated something beautiful. "Every little girl deserves flowers from her grandfather," she announced. Other parents began collecting their children and leaving early. One mother recognized Marcus from news coverage of his trial. Within minutes, our daughter's special moment had been destroyed. Sophie cried in the bathroom, while other parents whispered nervously in the hallway. He had brought roses with a card that read, "To my special angels." I filed for a restraining order the following morning. That's when the real battle began. Mom used her retirement funds to hire Marcus an attorney. They argued that I was alienating him from his family. The lawyer claimed that Marcus had served his time and deserved to maintain family relationships. My mother testified against me in court. The judge issued a temporary order, but warned that it might not be permanent. Marcus had completed his parole requirements. He wasn't technically violating any conditions by being near us. The final hearing was set for the following month. Meanwhile, family harassment intensified. Dad started showing up at my husband's office, trying to convince him to talk sense into me. Rachel attempted to pick up the girls from school, claiming I had asked her to. The school had to remove my entire family from the authorized pickup list. Even relatives I hadn't spoken to in years chose sides. Last week, I found Emma looking through old family photos on my tablet. "Why can't we see Papa Marcus anymore?" she asked. "Grandma says you're being mean to him." I wanted to scream. Instead, I held her close and distracted her with a game, but I knew this was far from over. The final hearing was in 10 days, and Mom had made it clear she'd mortgaged her house to fight me. That's when I realized how far this would escalate, and I knew I had to prepare for whatever Mom was planning. The mortgage threat wasn't bluffing. She'd already depleted her retirement savings on Marcus's lawyer. I started calling every family law firm in the area and scheduling consultations. If I could create conflicts of interest by meeting with them first, Mom would have to seek representation elsewhere. My husband took leave from work to help with the girls while I prepared for court, and we enrolled them in after-school programs to minimize the risk of unexpected family encounters. After Rachel's pickup attempt, the school principal agreed to personally supervise their dismissal. 4 days later, I received a call from my neighbor Kelly, who had always stayed neutral in family disputes, asking if we could meet for lunch. Against my better judgment, I agreed. Kelly looked exhausted when she sat across from me at the restaurant. She glanced around nervously before pulling out her phone. "I need to show you something," she said, scrolling through her messages. "Your mother has been organizing the family. There's a group text." My heart sank as I read the messages. 18 family members were actively planning ways to force contact between Marcus and my daughters. They discussed appearing at school events accidentally, encountering us at stores, and even having different relatives file for grandparent rights to legally overwhelm me. Kelly slipped her phone back into her purse. The worst part was reading how they talked about me. According to them, I was mentally unstable, vindictive, and poisoning my children against their loving family. Mom had convinced them all that Marcus's conviction was an overreach and that the victim's family had exaggerated everything. "I have children too," Kelly said softly. "I researched the court records myself. What Marcus did wasn't an overreach." I spent the rest of the day taking screenshots of everything Kelly shared with me. The group text revealed their entire strategy, and they planned to pack the courtroom with supportive family members, including several aunts and uncles who had prepared character references for Marcus. Mom had even convinced my former pediatrician to write about how caring Marcus had been with children. That evening, I spotted Marcus's car parked down the street from our house, this time with Mom in the passenger seat. They sat there for 2 hours just watching. When my husband went outside to confront them, they drove away, only to return the next evening. The girls noticed the tension, and Sophie asked why we couldn't go to restaurants anymore. Our attorney explained that the repeated surveillance could strengthen our case, but warned that family court judges often favor reconciliation. Marcus's completed sentence worked in his favor, and the system viewed him as rehabilitated. A week before the hearing, I was loading groceries when I noticed a woman watching me from across the parking lot. Emma asked why Grandma couldn't babysit anymore, and I gave her vague explanations about everyone being busy. But children are perceptive, and they sensed something was wrong. She approached me as I closed my trunk, introducing herself as Sandra from Child Protective Services. Someone had filed a report alleging I was denying my children access to family support. My hands trembled as I provided her with my attorney's information. Sandra was professional but thorough. Our attorney subpoenaed the CPS complaint, which alleged emotional harm through family isolation. The home visit went smoothly, The girls' rooms were organized. The refrigerator was stocked. Their artwork decorated the walls, and they chatted happily with Sandra about school and friends. But I knew this was just another tactic to exhaust us. It came as no surprise that the complaint originated from Mom's address, as she had formally accused me of emotional abuse for protecting my children from a convicted abuser. The irony would have been laughable if it weren't so frightening. As the hearing approached, Marcus became bolder, walking his dog past our house every evening, always careful to stay on public property and wave at the windows, knowing the girls might see. I kept them away from the front windows, but it meant living like prisoners in our own home. Dad left voicemails about how I was destroying the family. Rachel sent lengthy emails about forgiveness and healing. Relatives I'd blocked created new social media profiles to contact me. They all echoed the same message: I was cruel, unreasonable, and unforgiving. Then came the letters. Mom orchestrated a campaign where family members wrote directly to my daughters. I intercepted the letters addressed to them at our mailbox. But the violation felt overwhelming. They were trying to manipulate my children directly. I read each letter before destroying it, and they all followed a script: how much they missed the girls, how sad Papa Marcus was, and how Mommy was keeping them apart. One aunt even included photos of Marcus looking dejected. My husband installed additional locks and a security system. Another sent drawings Marcus had allegedly made for them while incarcerated. I wonder why the entire family was so invested in defending Marcus's rights, with 18 relatives in a group text and coordinated letters from everyone. We changed our routes to school and activities. I started shopping in the next town over, and we essentially went into hiding while living in our own neighborhood. The weekend before court, Mom made her boldest move yet. She filed for emergency grandparent visitation rights, portraying me as an unstable mother who had severed family ties without justification. She demanded immediate supervised visits with the girls, with Marcus allowed to attend as their grandfather figure. Our attorney called it a shotgun approach throw. Everything at the wall and see what sticks. The emergency petition would be heard alongside our restraining order request, and Mom was hoping a judge would compromise by denying the restraining order but granting her some access. I spent that weekend organizing evidence security footage, documentation of every encounter group text screenshots, character references from teachers and doctors who actually knew us. The morning of the hearing arrived cold and overcast. I dressed carefully, professionally, but not severely, and my husband wore his best suit. We dropped the girls off at school early, my stomach churning at leaving them even with the new security protocols. The courthouse parking lot was filled with familiar vehicles. Marcus sat in the front row of the courtroom with Mom and their attorney dressed in a new suit with a fresh haircut. He looked like a respectable grandfather, not someone with a violent criminal record. I recognized aunts, uncles, cousins, and family friends standing in groups whispering and shooting us hostile looks as we walked by. Mom dabbed her eyes with tissues, the picture of a suffering grandmother. Our side of the courtroom was nearly empty, just us, our attorney, and surprisingly Kelly. She gave me an encouraging nod as we took our seats. Whatever happened today, I wouldn't let them win. When the judge entered, I gripped my husband's hand. Everything we'd fought for came down to this moment. My daughter's safety was at stake, and I was prepared to fight with everything I had. The judge's gavel struck the bench, and the proceedings began. Our attorney presented the security footage first, showing Marcus's persistent surveillance of our home. The timestamps revealed a pattern of escalating behavior. Mom's attorney countered that a man had the right to walk his dog on public streets. During the first break, I noticed Rachel in the hallway, making phone calls, glancing at me, while speaking urgently into her phone. My husband stayed close, his hand on my back, as we navigated through clusters of hostile relatives. When Mom took the stand, she painted herself as a heartbroken grandmother denied access to her granddaughters. Our attorney's cross-examination exposed the reality behind her performance. She showed photos of happier times family gatherings where Marcus played with children, and her tears seemed genuine as she described how I had torn the family apart. When asked directly about Marcus's conviction, Mom claimed the victim's family had overreacted, and Marcus had simply been too physical in his discipline. Several relatives in the gallery nodded along, buying into her delusions. The judge called a brief recess to review evidence. In the hallway, Dad cornered my husband near the water fountain. I watched his face redden as he gestured wildly clearly, trying to pressure my husband into dropping the case. My husband simply walked away, leaving Dad fuming. Kelly testified next, bringing printouts of the group text messages. Mom's attorney objected repeatedly, but the judge allowed them as evidence of coordinated harassment. Kelly's voice shook as she read aloud their plans to ambush us at various locations. Marcus took the stand in the late afternoon. He couldn't explain why he'd chosen to walk his dog past our house specifically, and he stumbled when questioned about the recital intrusion. He'd clearly been coached speaking softly about rehabilitation and redemption, claiming he just wanted to be part of his granddaughters' lives and watch them grow up. His calm demeanor cracked when confronted with the victim impact statement from his case. During the lunch break, I discovered Mom had arranged for several book club members to attend. They filled an entire row, wearing matching crosses and shooting disapproving looks our way. One woman I recognized from Mom's reading group confronted me in the bathroom, lecturing me about forgiveness. The CPS investigation results were presented next. Sandra herself testified that she'd found no evidence of abuse or neglect, and that the children were thriving and well-adjusted. Mom's attorney tried to spin this as evidence that the girls needed their extended family, but it fell flat. My testimony came last, and I detailed every incident, every boundary violation, and every attempt to manipulate my daughters, as well as the letters they'd sent directly to them. I explained how we'd altered our entire lifestyle to avoid Marcus's stalking. Mom's attorney accused me of being paranoid and controlling, suggesting I was using my children as weapons in a family feud. I remained composed, sticking to facts and documentation. The judge announced he would review all evidence and issue a decision within 5 days. Marcus made his move as we exited the courtroom, stepping directly into my path and forcing me to stop. His eyes held a coldness that sent chills down my spine, and he leaned close enough for only me to hear his whispered threat about seeing the girls soon. My husband immediately stepped between us, and our attorney documented the interaction. Marcus stepped back with a smirk, rejoining Mom and their attorney. The threat was subtle enough to maintain plausible deniability, but the message was unmistakable. That evening, we found our mailbox overflowing with letters from various relatives, condemning our actions and demanding reconciliation. Someone had also left a devotional book on our doorstep with specific passages about forgiveness highlighted in yellow marker. The next morning brought fresh challenges. Sophie's teacher called to report that Rachel had appeared at school, claiming a family emergency. The school had followed our protocols and denied her access, but Rachel had caused a scene that disturbed several students. I rushed to the school immediately to speak with the principal, who showed me security footage of Rachel arguing with the front office staff and demanding to take the girls for a family emergency. The principal assured me they would continue monitoring the situation, but suggested we consider transferring schools. The situation was creating disruption, and other parents were becoming concerned. I left feeling defeated, knowing that Mom's campaign was working exactly as planned. At home, I found my husband installing additional cameras around our property. He'd taken the rest of the week off after Dad appeared at his workplace again, this time with Uncle Tom attempting to corner him in the parking lot during lunch. Kelly called that afternoon with disturbing news. The family group text had evolved into planning sessions for after the judge's decision. They discussed filing multiple lawsuits to drain our resources, and some suggested appearing at the girls' activities to establish accidental contact. I spent hours documenting these new threats for our attorney, each piece of evidence feeling like another weight on my shoulders. The girls sensed the tension becoming clingy and anxious. Emma had started having nightmares, but couldn't explain what frightened her. Marcus escalated further 3 days after the hearing when he appeared at the grocery store where I was shopping with the girls. He didn't approach directly, but positioned himself where the girls would see him waving enthusiastically and calling out their names. I rushed the girls out of the store, abandoning our cart. Sophie asked why we were leaving without our groceries, and Emma asked why we couldn't talk to Papa Marcus. Their innocent questions broke my heart as I struggled to explain without terrifying them. That night, we discovered someone had been in our backyard. Nothing was stolen or damaged, but our daughter's outdoor toys had been rearranged. Their playhouse door was open, and 2 wrapped gifts had been left inside. The security cameras had mysteriously malfunctioned during that exact time frame. My husband called the police while I checked every lock and window. The officers took a report, but explained that without evidence of forced entry or footage, there was little they could do. The gifts contained stuffed animals similar to ones from the recital, and the psychological warfare was taking its toll. I jumped at every sound-checked locks obsessively and barely slept. My husband began working from home to maintain constant surveillance. We were prisoners in our own lives, exactly what Mom and Marcus wanted. The morning of the judge's decision arrived with heavy rain, and we dressed carefully, again preparing for either outcome. I'd arranged for a trusted friend from my mother's group to watch the girls, someone completely disconnected from my family. The courthouse was even more crowded than before. In the courtroom, Marcus sat between Mom and their attorney, dressed in another new suit, as if they were attending a celebration rather than trying to force children to be near an abuser. Mom had rallied additional supporters, including several prominent book club members who wore coordinated outfits and carried signs promoting family healing. Mom clutched tissues dramatically as the judge entered with a thick folder of documents and began reviewing the case. It was clear that someone had missed the memo on what family healing actually means. As he continued to smile at family members, playing the role of persecuted victim, he mentioned Marcus's completed sentence and rehabilitation programs, as well as the evidence of stalking, coordinated harassment, and what appeared to be retaliatory CPS complaints. I felt my heart racing as he discussed the balance between protecting children and maintaining family relationships, citing cases where courts had reunified families after criminal convictions. Every word felt like another step toward losing everything we'd fought for. The judge's decision was mixed, but he extended the restraining order for 18 months, citing the stalking behavior and harassment. The security footage showed clear patterns of surveillance. The group text messages demonstrated coordinated harassment, and the recital incident showed blatant disregard for boundaries. Mom's side erupted in whispers and shuffling, while others seemed satisfied with the partial victory, and Marcus's face showed fury beneath his calm facade. However, he granted Mom limited grandparent visitation rights, 1 supervised hour every 2 months, at a neutral location, with Marcus barred from attending. Rachel intercepted us in the hallway as we prepared to leave. Our attorney explained that the restraining order was now more difficult to challenge, and the supervised visitation gave us more control over the situation. We pushed through with our attorney's help, ignoring shouted questions about denying children their family. Security intervened when she grabbed my arm, trying to force me to listen, and her removal caused another scene that drew stares and whispers. We had won the main battle, but it had come at a steep cost. Mom had her foot in the door now, and Marcus would undoubtedly use her visits to maintain indirect contact. Despite our security measures, we found more gifts on our porch when we arrived home. This time, 2 identical bracelets with charm pendants. The message was clear: Marcus wasn't giving up. He'd simply found new ways to violate boundaries while technically complying with the court order. That evening, our attorney called with concerning news. Mom's attorney had already filed paperwork requesting expanded visitation, claiming that the supervised visits were unnecessarily restrictive and harmful to the grandmother-grandchild relationship. After the girls had gone to bed, my husband and I discussed our options, including relocating, changing schools, and even legally changing our names. It seemed impossible to protect our daughters while maintaining their normal lives. Kelly texted screenshots from the family chat where they were celebrating Mom's partial victory and strategizing how to use the visits tactically. Some suggested having Marcus accidentally appear at the visitation location, while others discussed wearing recording devices to gather evidence against me. The next morning brought new challenges. Sophie's best friend's mother called to politely uninvite her from a birthday party because word had spread about the courthouse drama and Marcus's presence on the registry. She was sorry, but she had to consider all the children's safety. I understood her position, but Sophie's face fell when I explained. My husband's parents, who had remained silent throughout the ordeal, finally called to offer support, but suggested we might be handling things too harshly. She couldn't understand why she was being punished for adult problems, and Emma became withdrawn and difficult as a result. Their well-meaning ignorance hurt more than outright hostility. We spent the week establishing new routines around the court orders. I met with the supervised visitation coordinator to establish strict protocols. No gifts, no photos, no messages to relay. Mom would have exactly 60 minutes to visit under professional supervision. The first visit was scheduled for the following week. I carefully prepared the girls, explaining that Grandma would visit them at a special location. They seemed excited but confused about the restrictions. Sophie asked if Papa Marcus would be there too, and my heart sank at having that conversation again. Meanwhile, Marcus found legal ways to stay in our lives. He volunteered at community events we'd previously attended, and he joined organizations where we had memberships, always maintaining the required distance, but ensuring we knew he was there. Dad escalated his own campaign, appearing at my husband's workplace, despite warnings waiting in the parking lot, with religious pamphlets and printed articles about forgiveness. Security eventually banned him from the property, but he simply moved to the public sidewalk. Rachel began her own harassment via social media. She created multiple accounts to message our friends, sharing her version of events, painting me as mentally unstable, and claiming I was denying my children loving family relationships. Some friends distanced themselves, unsure what to believe. The stress manifested physically. I developed migraines and insomnia. My husband's blood pressure spiked, and the girls began acting out at school, their grades slipping. We started family therapy, which added to our mounting legal bills, and our attorney warned us that Mom's team was preparing a larger strategy, hiring a private investigator to document our lives, looking for any ammunition. Every public outing became a potential trap, and every interaction with the girls could be twisted into evidence. One morning, I caught Marcus photographing our house from a legal distance across the street. Kelly's family group chat revealed their long-term plans, which included waiting out the restraining order while gathering evidence of parental alienation. He made sure I saw him even waving at the security camera, documenting everything for his case. We installed panic buttons throughout the house and established code words with the girls. If anyone approached them unexpectedly, they were to find a trusted adult immediately. They coached each other on what to document and how to present themselves as victims. The weight of turning my children into cautious, fearful versions of themselves crushed me daily. A week before the first supervised visit, Mom sent a formal letter through her attorney, requesting permission to bring photo albums to share family history with the girls. When we declined, she accused us of cultural erasure and denying the children their heritage. As the visit approached, Marcus became more assertive, frequenting businesses near the visitation center, establishing legitimate reasons to be in the area. He couldn't enter during the visit, but he could position himself nearby, and the law was on his side. I met with the visitation supervisor to express my concerns, and she assured me their protocols were strict, but I could see the exhaustion in her eyes. She had dealt with families like ours before, and she knew how determined individuals could circumvent even the best safeguards. None of us slept well the night before the first visit, and the girls sensed our anxiety. Sophie kept asking if something was wrong. Emma clung to me, and our youngest regressed to behaviors she'd outgrown months earlier. That morning, I dressed the girls carefully, wanting them to appear well cared for, while not giving Mom any ammunition to use against us. My hands shook as I braided their hair, and my husband double-checked the recording device our attorney had allowed us to carry. The visitation center was a converted office building designed to feel comfortable while maintaining security, and we arrived early to familiarize the children with the surroundings. The supervisor took the girls to the visitation room while we waited in a separate area. Mom arrived punctually dressed impeccably and carrying a small bag that had been pre-approved. Her face lit up when she saw the girls through the window, and for a brief moment, I saw the grandmother she could have been if she hadn't chosen Marcus over their safety. I watched on the closed-circuit monitor as Mom hugged them warmly. She had brought approved coloring books and crayons, and for 30 minutes, it looked like a normal grandmother visit. Then Mom began her manipulation, talking about missing family events and how sorry everyone was that things had gotten so complicated. The supervisor redirected her several times, but Mom was skilled at subtle emotional manipulation. When the visit ended, the girls were confused and upset. They didn't understand why they couldn't see Grandma at her house, or why Papa Marcus couldn't visit too. The car ride home was filled with questions I struggled to answer honestly without further damaging them. That afternoon, our attorney called with news that Marcus had filed his own petition claiming harassment and emotional distress, alleging that our false accusations had damaged his reputation and relationships. I wondered why the judge would grant visitation rights despite documented stalking and harassment. It was clearly a vindictive move, but fighting it would cost us money we didn't have. During the second visit, Mom brought a family photo album she had compiled, and the war of attrition continued. Every legal filing drained our savings. Every harassment incident shattered our peace, and every manipulation attempt damaged our children's innocence. The supervisor had approved it after checking for inappropriate content, but Mom had been clever. She'd included photos of Marcus at every family milestone, portraying him as the beloved grandfather the girls were missing. Our attorney filed a motion to dismiss the harassment lawsuit, but the judge allowed it to proceed to discovery, which meant depositions and document requests. The girls absorbed every word, their confusion growing. When they returned to the waiting area, Sophie immediately asked why Papa Marcus couldn't come to the visits if he was so nice. Marcus's strategy was clear: drain us financially while maintaining his victim narrative. The family's coordination reached new heights as various relatives began appearing at the girls' activities. An aunt would show up at gymnastics class, a cousin at soccer practice, maintaining legal distance while making their presence felt. Other parents began noticing the pattern of family members lurking around. Kelly continued providing information from the group chat. They developed a rotation schedule to maintain constant pressure without any individual violating the restraining order. They documented every sighting of us, building what they called their alienation portfolio. 3 weeks after the court decision, I discovered Mom had joined the same fitness center where I attended yoga classes. She went to different sessions, but I always saw her in the parking lot. The girls' behavior deteriorated further. Sophie became withdrawn and stopped inviting friends over. Emma's nightmares worsened, but she still couldn't explain what scared her. And our youngest began having tantrums reminiscent of her toddler years. The family therapist suggested that the constant tension was affecting them more than we realized. Marcus's strategy escalated when he got a job at a coffee shop 3 blocks from the visitation center, giving him a legitimate reason to be in the area during every visit. I noticed his car parked strategically where we'd have to pass it entering and leaving, and Mom pushed boundaries even further during the 3rd supervised visit. She gave each girl a friendship bracelet with family photos attached, including Marcus. The supervisor made her remove them, but the damage was done. The girls didn't understand why they couldn't keep Grandma's gifts. Our financial situation deteriorated due to legal fees, therapy costs, and security measures. My husband took extra shifts while I worked from home to avoid leaving the girls with babysitters. And the stress showed in both our faces, with dark circles becoming permanent fixtures. Then came the accident, or what appeared to be an accident. I was backing out of a parking space at the drugstore when another car hit me, and the driver jumped out, apologizing profusely. Only when I saw Uncle Tom's son did I realize this was orchestrated. The deposition for Marcus's harassment case was scheduled for the following month, and our attorney prepared me for grueling questions designed to make me appear unstable. They'd use every family incident, every protective measure, as evidence of my irrational behavior toward a reformed man. He insisted on calling police and creating an official report that painted me as distracted and careless. Mom's visitation requests increased. She petitioned for unsupervised visits, citing the successful supervised sessions, and included affidavits from family members attesting to her character and my unreasonable restrictions. Each filing required a response costing money we didn't have. I began noticing cars following me on errands, different vehicles, but always maintaining the same careful distance. When I mentioned it to our attorney, he said proving coordination would be nearly impossible. They'd learned from the group chat evidence to be more careful. The 4th supervised visit brought new manipulation. Mom spent the entire hour telling the girls about family traditions they were missing, birthday parties, holiday gatherings, summer barbecues, all portrayed as magical events stolen from them. Marcus began jogging past the visitation center during our visits, timing it perfectly to cross our path and wave at the girls through the window while maintaining legal distance. The supervisor documented it, but technically, he wasn't violating any orders. Our home became a fortress of anxiety. Marcus's attorney interrogated me for 7 hours, questioning every decision I'd made since his release. I struggled to explain why we lived as if under siege without frightening them or poisoning them against family they still loved. We added more cameras, window sensors, and kept curtains drawn at all times. They portrayed my protective measures as paranoid delusions and my documentation as obsessive behavior. I maintained my composure, but inside, I was fracturing. 2 days later, Sophie's teacher called with concerns. Sophie had written a story about a family torn apart by a mean mother who wouldn't let anyone visit, and the teacher recognized the emotional distress and suggested additional counseling. Another expense, another acknowledgement of how this war was harming my children. Mom's next move was calculated. She began attending the same church we'd switched to after leaving hers, sitting across the sanctuary, dabbing at tears during services. Congregants who didn't know our story saw a grandmother separated from her granddaughters, and some began avoiding us. My husband suggested borrowing against his 401k, but I knew that would only delay the inevitable. Marcus had hired a second attorney, someone known for aggressive litigation, and the message was clear: they could afford to escalate while we couldn't. During the 5th supervised visit, something shifted, and Mom dropped her careful facade for a moment. When the supervisor stepped out briefly to use the restroom, Mom quickly whispered something to the girls. I couldn't hear it through the monitor, but I saw their faces change. Sophie looked scared, and Emma appeared confused. In the car afterward, neither girl would tell me what Grandma had said. They exchanged glances, but remained silent. That night, I found them huddled together in Sophie's bed, whispering. When I entered, they immediately stopped talking. Whatever secret Mom had planted was growing. Marcus filed additional motions in his harassment case, claiming lost wages from jobs he couldn't obtain due to my defamation, and requesting access to my social media accounts, email records, and personal journals. Our attorney fought each request, but judges often favored broad discovery, and the family's pressure campaign evolved. Instead of direct contact, they started a whisper campaign in our community. Anonymous letters to parents at school, calls to local businesses questioning our mental stability, gradually shrinking our world. Kelly warned me that Mom was planning something for the holidays, and the group chat was filled with cryptic references to Christmas justice and reunion planning. The 6th supervised visit was scheduled for December 22nd, and Mom arrived with a bag of wrapped presents the supervisor had to inspect. Each gift was appropriate books, puzzles, and art supplies, but each contained subtle reminders of what the girls were missing. That evening, I discovered why the girls had been secretive. Emma finally broke down and told me what Grandma had whispered. Papa Marcus had gifts for them hidden at her house, special gifts he'd made himself, and they could have them if they could convince Mommy to let them visit. The manipulation was masterful, and my children now shared a secret with their grandmother. They didn't understand why I was being mean about presents, and Sophie accused me of ruining Christmas. On Christmas Eve, we discovered 2 packages on our doorstep, left at 4:00 a.m., by someone in dark clothing who knew exactly where our camera blind spots were. Inside were handmade stuffed animals, clearly crafted with patience and skill, as shown by the security footage. The card simply said, "Love, Papa Marcus," in neat handwriting. I wanted to dispose of them, but the girls had already seen them. Taking the animals would make me the villain who stole Christmas presents. Keeping them meant Marcus had successfully invaded our home again. My husband and I exchanged worried glances over the girls' heads as they opened their presents on Christmas morning, clearly thinking about the animals in the garage and the mysterious gifts at Grandma's house. I made a compromise and stored them in the garage, promising we'd figure it out later. The day after Christmas, our attorney called with bad news. The judge in Marcus's harassment case had partially ruled in his favor, dismissing the wage loss claims, but finding that I had potentially damaged his reputation beyond the scope of protecting my children, and a trial would determine damages. I sat in my kitchen, staring at the legal documents, knowing we couldn't afford a trial. The retainer alone would bankrupt us. Mom and Marcus had won their war of financial attrition. I had to make an impossible choice: surrender or lose everything fighting. That night, I found my husband in the garage, looking at the stuffed animals Marcus had made, each crafted with disturbing detail and resembling our daughters. The implications made my skin crawl, but legally they were just gifts from a grandfather, and we had no proof of sinister intent. The next morning, Sophie's best friend's mother called to say they were switching schools. The drama surrounding our family had become too much, and other parents were considering the same. During the 7th supervised visit, I instructed our attorney to offer a settlement in Marcus's harassment case. The amount made me sick, but as I watched Mom manipulate my daughters with practiced ease, seeing their growing resentment toward me, and feeling the financial noose tightening, I realized I had to change tactics. I couldn't win by playing defense anymore. We didn't have $25,000, but the settlement came with conditions. Marcus couldn't refuse a permanent no-contact agreement that went beyond the restraining order. Marcus accepted the settlement, probably thinking he'd find a way around it later, and we had to liquidate our retirement accounts to pay it. It felt like paying ransom to a kidnapper, but Mom's reaction was swift and vicious. She filed for expanded visitation rights, claiming the settlement proved I'd been wrong about Marcus. But our attorney had anticipated this, and the settlement included Marcus's acknowledgement that continued contact could be detrimental to the children's well-being. The judge who reviewed Mom's petition saw through her manipulation. He noted a pattern of escalating behavior, coordinated harassment, and the use of supervised visits to undermine parental authority. Instead of expanding access, he reduced it to quarterly visits with stricter supervision. Mom's investment in Marcus had cost her everything: her retirement savings, relationship with her granddaughters, and now her limited access. The family group chat erupted in rage and disbelief, and Kelly sent me screenshots of their meltdown. Some blamed Mom for pushing too hard. Others blamed Marcus for taking the money. The coalition that had terrorized us for months fractured into bitter factions, and we used the breathing room to rebuild. Sophie's school agreed to implement additional security measures. We found a new therapist who specialized in family manipulation dynamics, and gradually, carefully, we began explaining age-appropriate truths to the girls about why Papa Marcus couldn't be around them. The quarterly visits with Mom became less traumatic. With stricter supervision and reduced frequency, she couldn't maintain the same manipulation. The girls began seeing her as a distant relative rather than a central figure in their lives. It wasn't ideal, but it was manageable. 6 months later, Marcus violated the no-contact agreement by sending birthday cards to each girl through a third party. Our attorney immediately filed for contempt, and this time the judge had no patience. Marcus faced jail time or a substantial fine. He chose the fine, further draining Mom's resources since she was still funding his legal battles. The extended family eventually dispersed without Mom's money to fund their campaign. With legal barriers entrenched, most found it easier to move on. A few remained loyal, but their individual efforts lacked the coordinated impact of the group assault. On the anniversary of Marcus's release, I sat in my backyard watching my daughters play. We'd paid a terrible price: financial ruin, family destruction, months of terror. But they were safe. Their innocence was scarred, but not shattered. My husband joined me, bringing coffee. We didn't need words. We'd survived by choosing the battles we could win and accepting the cost of those we couldn't. The war wasn't completely over. The restraining order would need renewal eventually. Mom would get her quarterly visits, and Marcus would likely probe for new weaknesses. But for now, my daughters were safe. The girls ran up to us, their faces bright with laughter. They'd adapted to our new normal with the resilience of children, and they now understood why some family members weren't safe, why love sometimes meant keeping distance. Every parent facing this choice would pay the price without hesitation, but few understand the true cost until the bill comes due. We'd paid in money, relationships, and innocence. But watching my daughters play safely in our yard, I knew I'd pay it again. I found it strange how much Mom had aged when she lost everything. Was she genuinely believing she was doing the right thing? Or was this all about control from the beginning? Sometimes the only victory that matters is surviving each battle and protecting what you love most. Story 2. With inebriated laughing, my wife confessed, I don't dream of a man like you. So I said nothing and did one thing that broke her idyllic life. I thus met my soulmate. Olivia is a 28-year-old college student. She was one of those folks who never seemed to try too hard and were always cool. But for her, it all simply worked out somehow. She was constantly giggling, surrounded by people, and the one with the wild last-minute idea for something entertaining. Studying hard was more my style. Get a good job. Create a kind for the future. For a time it worked, despite the fact that we were different. I fell deeply in love with him when we began dating in our junior year. Everything seemed exhilarating because of her. Before I met her, I felt like I was losing out on life because of the way she exuded energy. I thought, yeah, this is it. When we moved in together after graduating, I will live my entire life with this individual. Let's fast forward several years. We were married. In addition to having a respectable job, I was making every effort to create a secure future for us. Olivia, meanwhile, was still attempting to make sense of the situation. She experimented with a variety of pastimes and careers, but she never truly committed to any of them. I was okay with that. I earned enough money to comfortably support us both, and I was more than prepared to wait if she needed some time to figure out what made her happy. But eventually, things began to change. It was little at start. With a new explanation, every time she would arrive home later and later, lost sight of time, got sucked into work, or went out for a drink with pals. At first, I didn't give it much thought. She was outgoing. She had a large social circle. I didn't want to be the person that gets really upset if his girlfriend goes out late. However, when it became more frequent, the reasons began to seem implausible, as if she were merely making them. She would give me the most generic response when I asked how her night had gone, as if everything was okay, and then quickly shift the topic. Then there was the rest of it. The way she no longer touched me at all. How she ceased grabbing my hand whenever we went anywhere. When we sat on the couch together, she would lean into me. She would hardly acknowledge me while she sat on the other end browsing through her phone. It was only a phase, I kept telling myself. Perhaps she was under stress. Perhaps she was uncomfortable and unsure of how to express it. I made an effort to ease her burden, brought her favorite takeaway home, and organized a quick romantic night. When she wanted space, they even gave it. However, it pushed her farther away rather than drawing her back. I cooked dinner one evening. It was simple, but I knew she enjoyed it. When I contacted her to inquire when she would be home, she replied that she will be there shortly. It was 7 p.m. I was seated at the table by myself by 10 o'clock, gazing at her unfinished dish. At midnight, she finally entered. Didn't even appear shocked that I was still conscious. She said, "Oh, hey," as if it were nothing. She gave me a quick, scarcely perceptible peck on the cheek before heading directly to the bedroom. She didn't inquire as to why I remained awake. Didn't even recognize that she had brushed me off, let alone inquire why I was looking unhappy. That night, I became acutely aware that something was really wrong. I remained silent for a while. I simply watched and listened. She seemed to smile more at her phone than at me. She always seemed to have plans, but she never asked me to accompany her. She was constantly texting someone, and if I looked over, she was only slightly averting her screen. I wasn't a moron. I was aware that something was happening. I so made the decision to try things out before addressing her. I began to initiate contact. I was the first to cease messaging her. To test if she would ever share anything on her own, I stopped asking her about her day. She didn't. She didn't even seem to notice. Or perhaps she did and didn't give a damn. I began to doubt myself at that point as uncertainty began to sneak in. What had I done wrong? I went over our times together again, looking for the clues I must have overlooked. Perhaps from the beginning, I had been deceiving myself, seeing what I wanted to see instead of what was actually there. Now I remembered all of her little remarks, which I smiled and brushed aside. "Jake, you're such a planner." I had never felt the weight of each word before. "You're constantly cautious." Did she say, "Don't you ever just want to do something crazy?" With a tone of disappointment. Those used to make me giggle, but now they felt like unavoidable warnings. I had provided her with stability, ensuring her sense of security and a well-planned future. She appeared to care less the more I provided, even though I had been certain they were presents. I was unable to comprehend why. What had I done incorrectly? What was absent? Why wasn't I sufficient? I realized I had to take action. I had to move quickly to repair this if there was any hope at all. After some time, I made the decision that I had to take action, rather than waiting for things to miraculously become better on their own. I organized a solo weekend getaway for the two of us. In the Highlands, a hut. Avoid any distractions. No pals, no job. Only us. We could reset, I reasoned, if I could get her away from everything, including her phone and whatever was grabbing her attention. Despite her agreement, I could see she wasn't very happy. No. Oh, it sounds wonderful. That's really kind of you. Only a hesitant nod. I was taking the car in for an oil change, just like I had told her. I packed our suitcases that night. Hers was essentially empty, absolutely no effort, as if she were getting ready for a weekend of hostage-taking instead of a romantic retreat. Once more, I disregarded it. We started driving the following morning. She was hooked to her phone for at least 3 of the 4 hours of the travel. I tried speaking. When her friends inquired about her job, they even brought up the stupid reality program she had become fixated with a few months prior. Yes, that's what she would say. No follow-ups. I have no queries. Her scrolling sound alone. I told myself that I was overanalyzing things, and that she was simply exhausted. The lodge itself was pleasant, quiet, isolated, and surrounded only by trees. I had imagined us relaxing, talking deeply, and perhaps even mending whatever was damaged. However, she entered, looked about a little, and said, "Do we have service out here?" "What a great thing!" Or, "Jake, this is a fantastic idea. Do we just have service? I ought to have turned around and go home." I feigned a smile instead, saying, "Yeah, but it's spotty." Most likely a good thing. She didn't respond. We hiked all day. I did, at least. Distracted, she followed, hardly glancing at the scenery. She kept fiddling with the strap of her bag when I tried to hold her hand. We eventually arrived at this stunning overlook, one of those locations when the entire world seemed to be painted in front of you. She was on her phone at the time, so I turned to talk to her. That was it. I realized then that this wasn't a phase. She wasn't aloof due to job stress or a need for privacy. I was the fool who was still attempting to make things work after she had already checked out. We sat by the fire that evening. I prepared a basic supper, potatoes with grilled chicken. Picking at it and hardly eating, she gazed into the flames as if they were the solutions to her life's questions. She hardly touched hers while I sat there eating in quiet, stealing looks at her. Everything unsaid seemed heavier than ever in the void between us. To finally get the facts out in the open, I wanted to ask her what was wrong, but something about her stance and the way she averted my eyes told me I wouldn't like the response. I simply kept the night going instead. She was offered another drink, and she accepted it without question. She swayed slightly and poured another glass. She appeared to have been keeping it in for far too long, and to be in that drunken phase where everything poured out unadulterated. Then she suddenly burst into a scathing, even derisive laugh. I wasn't accustomed to hearing her laugh like that. It wasn't friendly or lighthearted. It tasted bitter. "Are you looking for something amusing?" She tilted her head at me and muttered, "You have never captivated me." I simply acted as though she had laughed. I put down my drink and scowled. "What does that signify?" She grinned while slowly circling her drink. "Jake, you put in so much effort." "Always had." She seemed to feel sorry for me by shaking her head. "Like it will make a difference." My chest constricted. "What are you discussing?" She put her chin on her hand and leaned forward. Her eyes were blurry, yet focused on me. "Do you believe that being a decent man is sufficient? That you're someone I should desire since you're steady, trustworthy, and kind?" She laughed softly again, as if I didn't understand. I never wanted that, though. I felt a chill creep into my gut. I opened my mouth to say, "Olivia," but she waved a hand, ignoring me. You know, I used to promise myself that I would eventually come to appreciate the peaceful existence and wake up to it. A kind guy never lets me worry about anything and plans our future together. She rubbed her temple and moaned. "But Jake, my God, you realize how dull that sounds?" I remained silent. My heart felt chilly as I just gazed at her. I felt as though I was observing a complete stranger, someone I had never actually interacted with. I had the impression that the woman before me was not the one I had loved for years. She was someone who had been anticipating the opportunity to undermine me. She wasn't even sorry now that she had. She continued to chat nonchalantly, discarding all we had created, as if it were a phase she had outgrown. I desired to experience an emotion, sadness, anger, anything, but I only experienced numbness. She had been too preoccupied with her own ideas. Someone who keeps me alert and excited is what I need. Someone who doesn't adhere to every regulation. It's truly important that people ask me how my day went. She gave a headshake. I need someone else. I felt as like I had just been kicked in the chest as I sat there looking at her. Different, I said in a hollow voice. Totally unaware of the harm she was causing, she nodded. An individual with a little edge. Someone who is occasionally careless and doesn't always act morally. It seemed as though she was finally recognizing me for who I was as she blinked at me. You're too secure. It was there. I had been striving to be the greatest boyfriend I could be for years, hurting my back in the process. The man who helped, who encouraged, who ensured she never had to go through what I went through as a child. She was assuring me that it didn't matter at all, that it wouldn't. I clenched my teeth and swallowed hard. You just told me this now too. She gave a shrug. I suppose I no longer want to pretend. Without a word, I reclined in my chair. She gazed at me. What are you waiting for? I wasn't certain. A fight, a breakdown, or even a last-ditch appeal for her to remain. However, I refused to give her that. I have nothing to offer her. I gave one nod, okay. She screwed her face in bewilderment. That's all. With a leisurely breath, I hardly gave her a glance. Is there anything else? I spoke in a bland, uninteresting tone. You've stated your position clearly. You don't want me. Thus. All right. She blinked, as if she didn't think I would handle it so well, as if she desired a response. I wasn't sure if she was acting intoxicated or actually intoxicated at the time. I reclined and gazed at her with a level composure that I knew would make her uneasy. Olivia? I refuse to grovel. I won't alter who I am to satisfy whatever fantasy you have in mind. I cocked my head a little, and I will never sit here and say I'm sorry for how I treated you. She hesitated just as she opened her mouth to speak. She seemed uncertain. I slowly got up and pushed my chair back. Intentional. I'm heading to bed. She made no attempt to stop me. When I considered it, the indicators were rather clear. At night, she avoided my calls. The name of this person kept coming up, and all of a sudden, she was always busy with activities that I wasn't involved in. I might have become a detective. Yes. She might have asked around or looked at her phone. I simply didn't care, though, as I sat there in the dark. Strange, isn't it? There's no need to attempt to win her back or find explanations. Nothing, simply empty. And I had already made up my mind by morning. She simply wasn't aware of it yet. She pretended nothing had occurred the following morning. As if it were any other morning, she yawned, stretched, and got up. As if she hadn't already ruined our relationship the previous evening. I waited for her to speak while I sat on the side of the bed and watched her walk around the cottage. She didn't. Do you remember what you said last night? I finally said. She hesitated. Jake, I was intoxicated. I can't recall much. In her eyes, I saw it. She recalled every word. She simply lacked the courage to own it. I had the option to push. Don't lie to me. I could have assured her that I wasn't a moron, that I had been aware of a problem for months. However, I didn't. I simply nodded instead. I made my decision after letting her believe I had purchased it. I would no longer stand up for her. If she wanted more, I wasn't going to plead with her to love me. Give it to her. Allow her to experience life without me bearing the burden of the connection. So, I began to back away. No more texts saying, "Good morning." No more inquiring about her day, scheduling dates, or bringing her favorite store-bought goodies home. I remained calm. I stayed warm. I simply quit. I don't believe she noticed at first. Or perhaps she did and felt a sense of relief. However, I gradually noticed the change. She began making little gestures toward me, caressing my arm while she spoke, and sitting on the couch next to me, rather than at the other end. My jokes made her laugh a bit too loudly, even the idiots who have never had a response before. It wasn't because she missed me that she was doing it. She sensed me drifting away, so she was doing it. It was no longer me who held on. When we returned home a week later, I could sense she was restless. When she thought I wasn't looking, she gave me a quick glance and bit her lip, as if she wanted to say something but wasn't sure how. Then I saw her looking at me one evening. She wasn't going through our phones when we were both seated. She was observing me. "You've changed," she remarked at last. I gave her a quick look. "Yes." She paused. "Is everything all right?" I gave a shrug. "I'm all right." That response didn't sit well with her. Her fingers tightened on the blanket's edge, and I could tell. She anticipated that I would ask her what was wrong, hug her, tell her I loved her, and implore her to share her thoughts with me. I didn't. I realized I had turned the tables at that point. After a few days, I began to notice small details. Even if she had nowhere to go, she would still dress up more. She would inquire about my whereabouts, activities, and companions. She became excited when I told her one evening that I was going out to supper with my friend Ethan. "Oh," where I gave a shrug. "I'm not sure yet." She paused. "I could accompany you." That was novel. She had avoided our plans like it was a second job for the past 6 months. I simply grinned. "No, tonight is only for the boys." I could see how her jaw tightened as she attempted a chuckle. She was falling apart. I left my phone in the living room one evening. I discovered she had gone through it when I woke up. I wasn't even angry. It was just funny to me. Anything to prove that I had checked out was what she was looking for. She was looking for an excuse to feel in charge. She was without one. Then everything exploded in the most predictable way imaginable. She had been seeing someone the whole time, it turned out. It was months of full-on dating behind my back, not simply a hookup or an inebriated error. She smacked me with the classic when it all came out, which was amusing. "You were never appealing to me. You're a dull line." After 8 years of depression, I nearly burst out laughing at the desperation of that excuse. She was only attempting to hide her identity, but she had become so careless in concealing everything that it was quite uncomfortable to witness. But to be honest, it didn't hurt at all. I had just finished. However, she must have believed she had me tricked. She stopped hiding her tracks, which made me realize that I was still utterly enamored with her. Perhaps she was too preoccupied with my retreating. Perhaps she became too at ease. She did, however, leave her laptop open on the kitchen counter one evening. And there it was, her communications. I have no idea why I looked. Perhaps I already knew what I would discover. He had texted. Weeks, not just recent ones. Talks for months. I browsed with no emotion at all. I was reading the text as if I were skimming a pointless email. "I am eager to meet you once more. It was a fantastic night. Does he have any suspicions?" I inhaled deeply. Before going to bed, shut down the laptop. She wasn't awakened by me. I didn't go up against her. Since I had already made up my mind what I was going to do, I did nothing. I woke up the following morning as if it were any other day, made coffee and showered. I pretended that I wasn't going to take her out of my life entirely. I then gave my lawyer a call. I had begun the procedure before she even got out of bed. She didn't know. I wanted her to feel it, so I wasn't going to warn her. One day, before she even realized she needed to fight for me, I wanted her to wake up and realize she had lost me. She desired more. That's precisely what she was going to receive. It was not long before I discovered the truth. Ethan called me a few days after I had been in touch with my attorney. Ethan isn't the kind of person who gets sucked into drama. He is the type of person that keeps to himself and doesn't bother others. I thus felt something was off when he abruptly and hesitantly contacted me. Jake. He seemed hesitant, as if he was unsure whether to speak at all. "I saw Olivia last night, and I'm not sure how to explain it. At a downtown pub, she was with a guy, and they were doing more than simply chatting." Where did I exhale after closing my eyes? He mentioned the intersection beside the booths in the rear. I experienced nothing. No shock, no rage, and no excruciating agony. The messages, the late hours, and the way she began to treat me like an afterthought are things I believe I was previously aware of. For months, I had been aware that Ethan was only validating what my intuition had been telling me. "Jake, are you all right, man?" He couldn't see me, but I nodded. "Yes, indeed. I'm doing okay. Do you want me to take any action?" "No." I said I understood, and I did. I knew what I needed to do already. I informed Olivia I wouldn't be home for supper that evening and made up an excuse about working late. She only said, "Okay," hardly reacting, and returned to her phone. Around 9 p.m., I waited after parking my car 2 blocks from the intersection. I suspected she wouldn't have me wait for very long, but I wasn't sure how long I would be waiting there. She did really leave our apartment complex at 9:30. She was not as dressed up as she would be for a social gathering. Just jeans, no fancy dress, no high heels, a crop top, and she only ever brought that suitcase when she wasn't immediately going home. I went with her. All I needed was evidence, just enough to keep her in view, but not near enough to be noticeable. She moved quickly, as if she had an urgent place to be. I needed to see it for myself, even though I already knew where she was heading. I waited a few minutes before following her as she entered the intersection. I watched from the shadows, staying close to the door. And there he was. I was clean cut, but the guy was the total opposite. He had a smug smile, tattoos across his arms, and a gruff exterior. He seemed to have never had to work for anything in his life. Damn, she had never looked at me the way she did when she looked at him. As if she had been waiting all day, she slid into the booth and leaned toward him right away. Without hesitation, he wrapped his arm around her, and she melted into him. For a moment, I just watched and let everything to sink in. I then pulled out my phone, took a photo, and left. No conflict, just hard, cold evidence. By the time I returned to my vehicle, my lawyer had already received the photo. Get the paperwork started. I seldom talked to Olivia over the following 2 days. At first, I wasn't sure if she noticed. She didn't appear to notice how quiet I had become since she was so engrossed in whatever illusion she was living in. I took a strong step back, ceased checking in, and began arriving home late without warning. She persisted in demanding answers, but I simply remained silent. But when I covertly transferred the majority of our joint funds into a different account, the true switch was flicked. Just defending what was rightfully mine, nothing criminal. Her entire performance shifted at that point. As if someone had switched a switch, she became attached and lovely all of a sudden. The phony "I love you" began to fall like confetti. She was discussing getaways and organizing date evenings, even recommended this romantic retreat. Her scrambling was almost comical. In fact, I declined everything. She then checked our joint account in the morning. Her eyes were filled with worry as she realized the majority of the money was gone. Priceless. Although she made an effort to appear calm, I could see that her hands were shaking as she quickly checked her phone. I was aware of her weekly spa treatments, her impulsive shopping trips, and her expensive lunches with her new buddy that were on the verge of collapsing. She continued to look at me anxiously, as if she was waiting for me to mention it. I didn't. Like every other morning, I read the news and sipped my coffee. I prepared the divorce documents a week later. When I returned home, I saw her cuddled up in her favorite place on the couch, gazing at her phone, as if it contained the solutions to every issue she had. Perhaps she was anticipating a text response from him. Perhaps she hoped this was all a terrible dream. When I stepped in, she didn't even raise her head. For a moment, I just stood there and watched. In some way, she appeared smaller, as if she had begun to feel the consequences of her actions, as if she had anticipated it. After taking the envelope out of my pocket, I let it fall on the coffee table. She flinched at the sound of paper hitting wood. She reached for her phone and put it down carefully. Her whole body tensed as she turned it over and read the lines at the top. Her eyes were wide and scared as she swallowed hard and looked up at me. Her voice cracked, "Jake, this is not required." I laughed a little dryly. "Yes? And what's the reason?" She shook her head, unable to find the right words. For something that would cause me to give up. At last, she forced a feeble grin and added, "We can figure this out. We don't have to take any severe measures." Extreme. I raised an eyebrow and repeated, "Similar to dating someone you were never genuinely interested in for years." She gave a start. I didn't say that, she muttered. I tilted my head and crossed my arms. In fact, you did. You simply can't recall. Or you act as though you don't. She gave a head shake. You know I was intoxicated, Jake. Yes, but such words come from someplace while you're intoxicated. She glanced at the papers and then looked away. I sighed and moved in closer. I responded in a calm but forceful voice. Tell me, Olivia, you've known for how long? She gave me a perplexed expression. What I explained that I wasn't your type. You've known for how long? Her mouth parted, then closed again. She was aware that there was no correct response to it. She finally exhaled a trembling breath. It isn't that easy. I chuckled, this time a genuine one, as she would undoubtedly say that. I shook my head and replied, No, Olivia. It really is that easy. Her fingers gripped the envelope so firmly that the corners began to crumble as tears filled her eyes. I stopped her in her tracks. I spoke steadily and gave you everything I had. I cherished you. I centered my life around you. You were staring at me like I was a backup plan the entire time, and I thought I was making you happy, as if I were secure. She sobbed softly, but I continued. I heard you said you needed more. I went on seeing her fall apart before my eyes. Congratulations, then. You got it. You may now go get the excitement you have been seeking. She gave a head shake. Tears are streaming down now. Please, Jake. I was wrong. However we can resolve this. I repeatedly stated, no, you made a choice. Her face was wiped. She muttered, I don't know why I did it. Whatever grip she could have had on me simply crumbled. I stated plainly, you didn't wreck everything. I deserve better, as you just shown. She covered her lips with her palm as she choked on a sob. I went to the door after grabbing my keys from the counter. I made one final circle around before leaving. You desired excitement, I responded in a composed tone. Final, look for it. With the sound of her weeping behind the closed door, I departed. Better than any therapy session. She did precisely what I anticipated her to do, and I attempted to concentrate on myself after all this craziness. Acted as though she was doing well. Her stage was social media. People share pictures of their evenings out, expensive cocktails and beaming faces when they need to reassure themselves and the world that everything is well. She wanted everyone to think she was enjoying her best life without me and that she had moved on with ease. For a moment, I nearly let myself think about it, almost fell for it. Perhaps she was truly content. However, life tends to catch up. According to mutual acquaintances, the man she had broken up with utterly abandoned her and lacked the maturity to finish the relationship, just stopped responding to texts. I unfollowed her, vanished without a trace. She no longer had the exhilaration she was seeking. Then her work. She had always relied on charm and justifications to get through coasting by half and asking her task. Eventually, however, the act was no longer bought. She lost her job, something to do with restructuring or downsizing. However, everyone was aware of its true meaning. Simply put, they didn't need someone who wasn't working on the project. For a short while, the friends, the ones she went out with, stayed. However, they began to vanish as the funds dried up, and she stopped being the entertaining one. 2? The persons she had put before me, one by one. When she really needed them, they weren't there. 8 months have passed since everything happened to me, and to be honest, life has been amazing. Moved into this lovely apartment in the heart of the city. It turns out that you can afford lovely things when you're not paying for someone else's shopping obsession. LOL. I resumed rock climbing and began dating Sarah, a fantastic girl from my club. Simply said, gym girls are unique. The small things we do together truly make her happy. We spent hours last week wandering the city and grabbing inexpensive tacos. Additionally, it was superior to any elaborate meal I ever had with my former partner. The finest aspect, she earns her own money and covers her own expenses. Crazy idea, huh? The most amusing aspect, last week my ex made an attempt to harm me. Can we chat, please? I only chuckled while gazing at my phone. Didn't bother to open it. Mutual friends claim that she has been couch surfing after being evicted by her cheating boyfriend. The grass wasn't greener, I suppose. My only regret in hindsight is squandering 3 years on someone who thought I was a legless ATM. However, sometimes experiencing the negative is necessary to appreciate the positive. Isn't that right? This blew up wholly. Thank you to everyone who asked guys and for all the accolades and support. Indeed, Sarah is well aware of the story. And no, I'm not going to give the ex another opportunity, lol. Some bridges are designed to remain in flames.